Okay, so we're here with Kelly Metz-Matthews again, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about working in Google Documents with a collaborator. And we're looking specifically this time at the review process. So different features that we can use in Google Documents. And we're just going to show you on screen how it looks. So without further ado, oh, I didn't introduce you very well. So feel free to say a little bit more.
That's all right. Thank you so much, Krista. I appreciate it. Kelly Metz-Matthews. I teach English and English for speakers of other languages and teacher education. So I teach across the disciplines, and I'm really excited to share this with you. I use Google Docs all the time, and I love it, not just for editing, but also for collaborating, creating dialogue. So this is exciting and fun.
Definitely.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And just to give all of you some context, what I'm sharing is just, it's a real document. It's a draft in progress at the time. It has since been submitted and thankfully accepted, but this is a draft in progress of a book chapter proposal that our colleague and I put together, my colleague, Dr. Michelle McConnell at Fresno Pacific University. And you know, it's imperfect because it's a draft, and that's why I pulled it up, because I wanted to show you something that wasn't necessarily complete and perfect as a way to illustrate how you can use Google Docs and these review functions in an effective way. So I'd like to start out by just pointing out, for those of you who have not, or have not used Google Docs extensively, that of course I can come in at any time and simply type in the document, right? You can see that I'm typing in the document, and any other person who's in here can see that too. That's one of the really special features, is this is in real time. So Krista, I've shared this document with you, so you can see what I'm typing on the other end, right?
That's right, and I can also type ha ha ha.
There you go. I love it. I love it. I'm not doing anything fancy here. I'm being real. So
people on the video, I'm typing that on my computer. It's showing up on my screen, but it shows up at the same time on Kelly's screen. And it just shows you clearly that that's Krista working in there. And if I look on my screen, I see that that's Kelly typing ha 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 on her side.
Right.
So nothing's hidden. So both of us are in here, but we can both see where each other are.
Right. And I love that, because sometimes you do edit or review a document on your own, sort of in the quiet space of your home when someone else is not doing it at the same time. But what's wonderful about Google Docs and being able to do this together is you can actually sit down with a colleague who may or may not be in your office, who may or may not be in your same region, and you can work on a document at the same time, just like Krista and I are now. So I love that component. And again, typing directly in the document is certainly one way of doing that. That allows you to make small edits, to proofread together. And I notice, thank you, my next topic of conversation was going to be comments, which I use all the time. And I see that Krista has left me a comment right down here, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And what she's done is she simply commented on the fact that perhaps we want to delete this note we have here of 300 words in the call for proposals. It was suggested that our perspective should be 300 words. And I put it here as a reminder for us. But Krista's right. If we were actually putting this together before we submitted it, yes, we would need to do that. So I'm simply replying to her comment and letting her know, yes, whoops, yes, we should.
And then maybe, often when you're working through these documents, you don't want to delete that 300 words until the final, but you don't want to forget to delete it. So you can just leave a comment. But maybe Kelly doesn't want to delete it right now because we're too early in the process.
Right. And I want to remember, right? Oh, 300 words. That's just a quick reminder for me. And what's great about these comments is they serve as a reminder too, right? They are a reminder later that I need to come back to something. And I do that all the time too. So let me show you another example of the type of way that I might use a comment. If I'm thinking through something, right? And I'm not quite sure if I want to make a change yet, but something is bothering me about it, or I think it deserves a little bit more attention, I might call it out for my colleague. So I might put a comment that says simply something like, I'm not sure that this is, that this is quite right. What do you think? right? Or I might comment, hey, Michelle, does this feel like too many words for a title to you? Let's mull this over and come back to it later. So this is the type of thing one might comment on. You might comment on, and you might make an editorial note, but a lot of these are developmental. They're questions, things that you are thinking about and you don't have an answer for yet. And you'll also see that, and Krista, I'd love to know if this is something that you do frequently as well. But another thing I do is I mark things to return to later, right? I might find a sentence and I might decide it's not quite ready yet. There might be something I want to add. I want to mull more over. So I'll simply make a note to myself. And personally, what I like to do is just write note to self, return to this later, because perhaps I know it's not quite developed enough and I want to remember to come back to it, right? And I love that because then I am reminded of the additional work that I need to do, but also my colleagues can see some of my thinking, right? As I'm going through, I might catch a piece of the document that I feel like isn't fully developed quite yet. And I might put a note to myself and or my co-author that says something like, I don't know, have we fully developed this yet? Have we fully developed this idea? Oops.
Yeah, mouse problems. I have that happen. And so another thing that you mentioned before was that you can use highlighting in this to just highlight certain things. So maybe when you have a bunch of facts that you have to check, you could highlight them all pink, or you could highlight the proof you were saying. So maybe we could just show quickly how we would highlight something. Maybe I can.
Absolutely. So we can highlight a whole section and or we can change the text color, which is another really useful way of doing that. So let's go ahead. I'm going to highlight this first sentence in the abstract. So I'm going to make it bright yellow. Perhaps I just want to call it out to my colleague because we're working together in the document. I want to make sure they're in the right spot. Or maybe I want to say to my colleague, as I mentioned earlier, hey, I just want to let you know that any text that I have changed to say red means it's something I really want you to review, or means it's something that I have already proofread and I think is ready to go. Right?
Yeah.
So we come up with our own key, if you will.
And color coding could be according to people, but often people use blue and green to mean ready to go and red to mean look at this.
Right. So I think we have a lot of options, and there are kind of more traditional ways of doing that, as you mentioned, sort of the red and green, but you might come up with something else that really works for you and your colleagues, or that calls attention to something. Sometimes something I do, for example, is in order to make sure I have all of my citations ready to go, before I finalize a document with a colleague, I actually go in and I highlight or in some way color code all of the citations, so that when I'm putting together my reference page, I can look back at each of these and make sure one didn't slip through the cracks. So this is another really useful way to go through your document and ensure you're not missing things.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful. Did you have other ones for this one, or should I talk?
I don't think so. I think I'm ready for any other questions you've got.
Well, in a future video, we're going to look at how you can look back, because another question people have, of course, when they're working with teams and why they might be resistant to working with Google Documents is, well, what if someone makes an error? So let's say that Krista comes in here and like a numpty, she writes, I was out with Bill the other night, like obviously this happens, you're talking to your friend, and then it ends up in your document, right? And then Kelly's like, oh my gosh, no, we can't let the client see that. So maybe it shows you where I've made the change. I think if we go up under my
sure does. It sure does. There are a couple of things we can do with that, and I would always call your attention right up here. So you can see the last edit was made seconds ago by Krista. So I'm actually going to click right on that, and you can see the last edits that were made. You can even see when they were made. And if you want, you can also revert to an earlier history. That's that great fear. Well, what if you have 10 people working on a document at once and someone makes a mistake and deletes something really important? No problem. You can go back to an earlier version.
Yeah, or your cat gets in there and does stuff. I've had that happen.
You have mouse problems like I did earlier. Your mouse shifts and it affects your typing, you bet.
So you didn't mean real mice, you meant the mouse.
No, I meant
my mind went to mice running across your computer.
No, not real mice, not real mice.
Notice how to quickly show the mistake that I just put in there about chatting my social life in the document. So how would you quickly go in as my co-author and get rid of that?
Yeah, so you can see here on the right-hand side, you can see the different versions that we have created of this document, right? And we can go in here, you have a number of different sort of actions that you can take. You can name this version. So you could say something like our final draft, something to that effect, or you can make a copy. You can actually even revert to an earlier version. So you can see I made some edits earlier in this, and you could even restore an earlier version. So this would be what I would click if I wanted to restore to a much earlier version of this document. The earlier version of this document, for example, had the actual call for proposals in it. So I deleted that to show it to you today, but you can see if I wanted to go back and find that earlier call that I don't really think I need anymore, but if I decided to, I could click on this, I could find that earlier version, and if I wanted to, I could restore that version, right? So if some edits were made that I was not comfortable with, I would have the opportunity to do that.
And so as the senior author on this document, you want to delete that I wrote, I was out with Bill the other night. You can just go right in there and delete it, right?
You sure can, absolutely. So I'm going to go back to the document. Right now, we're just in the version history, but I'm going to go back to the document, and I can see you made this mistake right here. And no big deal. I'm just going to take it out, and you'll see on your screen, Krista, that I have removed it. And hopefully you're not upset with me that I removed your text.
No, but I mean,
you can go back in and recover it.
And I mean, the nice thing with Google Documents is because you can see what everybody did. There's not as much. Sometimes there's a lot of tension over sending versions and saying, please, Cynthia, could you change what you said? We need it to be an active voice. And all of that saying please to the other person. And it can be very time consuming. It could take weeks of things going back and forth. So here we can just change it. And then you could even put a little comment in and said, you know, Krista, I noticed you were talking about your date with Bill, so I deleted that. or whatever. If you felt a need to communicate with me about that, probably you could just delete that and not communicate. But if you wanted to communicate, it's so much quicker than having to send the documents back and forth like we did in the past.
Right. It's not uncommon that, you know, I collaborate with a number of people, but I reference my writing partner, Michelle, a lot, but it's not uncommon that Michelle and I will simply go in and adjust one another's work. And then we'll make a comment for the other in the margins where we say, to your point, something like, hey, Michelle, you know, I know we talked about actually adjusting this way. I don't think you were able to get to it. So I went ahead and did it. What do you think? Is this in line with your original intent, right? That way you're still really valuing the other person's opinion and showing them you're not going in and just adjusting all of their work, right? So you still have that collaborative sort of aspect to your work, but you're still just going in and doing it. So it gets done faster. Right?
Yes. And I love that you're actually playing into something that I wasn't even interviewing you about, but just how the tone of voice as a reviewer, you know, and you just illustrate exactly like using this tool, you can still be very polite and collaborative and make good employer relationships and colleague relationships, even with people you don't meet in person. You can still develop that with that nice kind of language, that really good, nice.
And I want to also point out that you're going to be working in Google Docs with different audiences, right? So if you're working with colleagues, or you're working with your boss, or you're working with a client, the language you use in the margins would be appropriate to that type of relationship, right? It might be a bit more formal. But let's say you're working with someone you know really well. You've been colleagues for 15 years. The comments that you leave in the margins might look more like the actual speech that you use with that person. And you'll notice, I forgot to mention, but I did that intentionally in one of my comments down below. Here it is. I was imagining in my head that I was writing to Michelle, and I wrote, I don't know, have we fully developed this idea? So you can see that's still pretty casual. And that's because I'm thinking about my relationship with my audience, right? And with my collaborator. In this case, it's something I know really well. But the great thing about these comments is you have an opportunity to think through the type of language that you're using with that person and ensure that it is appropriate for that audience.
It's just a great, I think we've sort of covered the basics of how Google Docs can be friendly and efficient, which is fantastic. It takes a lot of the frustration out of sending Word documents back and forth by email or even by FTP site, which is a whole nother headache. So this is nice and streamlined. Oh, another thing we were just touching on, and I think we discussed before, but this is a pretty secure platform. I mean, they say Google's not 100% secure for government secrets, but have you ever had a problem with strangers getting into your documents?
I have never had a problem with it. Granted, I'm not sharing any government secrets. I don't know any government secrets, but I'm not sharing any in my documents. However, I use Google Docs with my students. I often have them actually turn their work in Google Docs so that I'm able to review it in this collaborative way. I wouldn't do that and wouldn't ask it if I didn't think it was a secure enough platform.
And the
On which
yeah.
I'm sorry?
The university wouldn't let you either.
No, actually, and in my case, the university actually provides us with a Google account, with a Gmail account, and with access to a university-sponsored Google Drive. So certainly the university has deemed it safe enough, and that's usually enough for me. I'm not an expert in IT, but that's usually enough for me.
Yeah, and you and I haven't had security issues. So if it's a high level corporate thing, people might want to check with their lawyers, but for most uses, this is a pretty excellent tool. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing just so you're not looking at this book proposal draft the whole time, but I'm so pleased to be here and I hope that was helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.